Y vamos a seguir en el Congreso con una ponencia de un gay speaker que ya estuvo con nosotros el año pasado en Barcelona, pero que ha querido venir también hoy aquí para que muchos de vosotros que no estuvisteis en Barcelona le podáis oír. Cada año tiene cosas nuevas que decirnos. Es uno de los padres, abuelos, como yo de ITIL, de toda la vida. He was involved in ITIL since ITIL version 1, version 2, version 3, and now he's in IBM since 2007. I mean, he's an evangelist for service management, and now he's working for the software group. Now, just to put the best practice inside the software, I think Ivor will keep putting the best practice inside our software. Thank you very much, Ivor, for being here again in Spain. The stage is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I always think that I'm on first thing in the morning on the second day so that you don't have to come in early. But I'm pleased to see that so many people have turned up. Maybe for a rest. Yes. They told me, according to the template, that I had to put in a slide about myself. And the only notable thing, as Ricardo probably just mentioned, is just how old I've managed to get still in service management. The interesting thing, which I think will come out in the talk, is that I listen to a lot of people stand up here and talk about how long they've been in the industry, and it's usually about 70 years in IT and 20 years in service management, and I've done it backwards. I've been in service management a lot longer than I've been in IT, and I think that helps me to get the focus on the customer side of things, which is what I want to talk about this morning. I said at the beginning of there that I think I've outlasted almost everyone in the business. I have to say that the only exceptions I know about are Malcolm Fry and possibly David Wigley, who doesn't count anymore because he has retired, mostly moved to Spain and now plays golf a lot. I don't think that counts as service management. And as Ricard said, I was impressed with the way Ricard managed to say that I've now moved into software group without making it sound too much of a disappointment. Talking about you, sorry. Right, what I want to talk about this morning is my view on the role that customers need to play. It's not a very content-filled presentation, designed for early mornings after conference dinners. And it starts, logically enough, with a photograph of my sock drawer. And just to prove it is mine, I have on the socks on the top of the photograph there. And anyone here got children? And I don't know if it's a tradition in Spain, but I suspect it's universal. What men get from their daughters on birthdays and Christmas is socks. Whatever you want, whatever you've asked for, whatever your expectations are, you will get another pair of socks. And that's what I got for my birthday this year. If you open the packet, take out the socks and say, "Thank you, dear, that's exactly what I needed," whatever you're thinking, it's your fault if next year you get another pair of socks that you don't need. If you don't play the sensible role in this, then it is entirely your fault that you have more socks than would sink a battleship. Now, I had the problem solved for me this year by my partner, who decided that she was fed up seeing me wearing socks with holes in, went through the sock drawer, threw away most of them, and I now need more socks from my daughters. But if we don't play our part in this communication, then it's our fault it goes wrong. So the same thing seemed to me to apply to suppliers and customers. If the customers don't say, then it's their fault they get the wrong thing. Also realise that in IT terms, in service management terms, we live in a fashion industry. So I thought I'd illustrate this with some fashion. This is the kind of thing that probably lasts forever. That fashion, I hope, lasted for about 3 years at most, sometime in the 1960s. It says much about this man's desire to be rich and famous that he allowed himself to be photographed in that. But we do things, outrageous things for fashion. But in IT terms, we've seen, service management terms, we've seen some interesting fashions recently. I remember service catalogue became a fashion for about a year and a half, and everyone had to have one. When ITIL V3 came out, it was having a service strategy that seemed to be important. And now, certainly in IBM, and I've compared notes with my friends in HP and CA and others, and we all have much the same attitudes to the current fashion. If you're talking to a customer, you have to say cloud computing at least every minute. It's not required to understand it, but you must say cloud computing every moment. That fashion will go, and people will actually start doing cloud computing. But the fashions will come and go. But all of these fashions have got business or customer in there somewhere. And yet we don't seem to deliver through to actually reach those customers. So hopefully it will turn into a reality rather than a fashion statement that we can evolve our customers. Because we can't do this on our own. It isn't just a supply-driven exercise. Now, this is a picture. I've been trying to use my own photographs a lot more recently because our legal department has pointed out that if you download photographs from the web and then put them in your presentation, it can all go horribly wrong later if somebody spots it. So this is my photograph of an A380 that I was quite pleased with. And I put it in the presentation before the engine started exploding. So it's not about them going wrong. Just pretend you don't know that. But if you imagine you're Singapore Airlines and you've just bought the world's biggest airliner, and you then need to decide what to do with it. Do you sit down with a map of the world showing all the airports capable of taking this airliner and think, we could run it from there to there. That's about the right distance for the amount of fuel we can get on it. Say, yeah, we'll run it twice a day from Singapore to Reykjavik. What you actually do is try and find out where people might want to fly before we do this. And you have to involve the customers. We have to do things like market research. Anyone be involved in market research in their company? We'll go out and find out what customers want. Many businesses are good at that, banks and other people. We also hear a lot about running your IT organisation as a business, and yet we don't bring those ideas into that business. We don't do market research inside the organisation. We don't talk to our customers. And maybe we don't even know who our customers are. But when we do try and talk to them, the traditional approach that I've seen is a bit like the socks. First of all, we don't ask our customers. And then if we do ask them, they don't answer us. And I'll come back to that one in a moment. And if they do answer, nobody listens. We didn't really want your answer. So, I don't know, Spain's not so bad, but in the UK we're terrible at complaining. So if you're sitting in a restaurant and the food is not good, because it's written in their instructions about customer care, the waiter will come up to the table exactly 7 minutes after the food was delivered and say, is everything okay? And in England we always say, yes, it's lovely, thank you. It doesn't matter whether it's making you feel ill or it's stone cold or anything. You always say, yes, it's lovely. So I presume that the waiters don't listen. Once it happened to me. We were sitting there. We were all grumbling about the food. It had taken far too long to arrive. And it was cold and not good. And the waiter came up and said, is everything okay? And 5 of us turned instantly and said, yes, it's fine, thank you. And we had an American woman with us who said, no, it's absolutely unacceptable, and this hotel is disgusting. And the guy had actually turned around and taken 3 steps away before the words got into his mind. And he turned around and said, what? What do you mean? You're not supposed to say that. We eventually got food for free, but it was an interesting observation. So, people don't listen. Suppliers don't always listen when you give the answer, because it's not worth the effort. And people get distracted. This is my distraction picture, which you may recognise as Barcelona, which I took at last year's conference. I still don't know what everybody was looking at, because I didn't realise I'd got the picture until after I got it out of the camera. But clearly there's some very interesting part of the cathedral out. But the serious point about distractions is that the customers have got a job to do. We're a supplier to people who have other things on their mind sometimes than just one of the features to me of IT people over the years is that I hate, actually I'm going to lie then. I was going to say I hate to use the word arrogance, but actually I love to use the word arrogance about it. And I've seen so many diagrams about how IT supports the business that have just one column. There is IT, there is business. As if there was nothing else involved in the business than using your IT. There may be 1 or 2 businesses like that, but most of them have got other things to worry about as well as giving the IT. It's true that the Ford Motor Company and General Motors and Peugeot and all the rest won't work if the IT fails. But there are a lot of other ways to stop them working as well. So the customers are likely to be distracted. So we need to work out how to involve them. And before you can do that, you have to know who your customer is. And one of the problems with businesses is they talk about customer. And maybe we shouldn't have used that word, but we did. If you work for a bank, or in this case, the picture I drew was for the Ministry of Health in New Zealand, when I was doing some work. And they absolutely understood that they existed to supply a service to the public. And they had a wonderful mission statement. I'd expected it to be around the Ministry of Health in New Zealand. Their mission is to repair broken New Zealanders. To cure people who are ill. But in fact, they were better than that. Their mission was to increase the overall health of citizens in New Zealand. And I thought that was wonderful, exactly right. The IT department where I was working, I asked them for a service catalogue. And the man smiled broadly and said, yes, we have a service catalogue. And he disappeared for 20 minutes. He came back with a stack of paper this high, printed in tiny letters, that said everything about the way the IT department did things, but nothing about what they did and why they did it. It was not a service catalogue. So they knew exactly what they did down here. The organisation knew what it did at the top, but they didn't glue them together. And the problem was, they thought customer were the people outside the business, and they were the organisation's customers. They weren't IT's customers. Most people in IT are actually delivering to someone else inside your company. And it's very hard to realise sometimes that your customer isn't some important separate person, but it's the person you've known for 20 years, the person you may play football with, or go to the bar with, or whose sister you fancy, or whatever. Treating that person as a customer is not natural. It's very difficult because they're the person that you hit and you laugh and you owe money to. But at work, if you're supplying the service that their job depends upon, they are your customer. And I've found a lot of organisations where they haven't been able to really understand that you have to do what this person wants because it's somebody they know too well. So getting over that familiarity issue is quite a big step for a lot of companies. It's easy to see the people out there who are paying you money as customers. And of course there is some direct connection. But I think working with your colleagues as customers is a difficult art, one that needs to be practiced and understood. And then the other issue about finding your customers. I asked my daughter for a photograph of somebody scary, and this is what she gave me. It's a friend of hers called Evie. I suppose I should have checked with her the pictures going up on the website. She'll be flattered. And the issue here is it's very easy within a company to confuse the customer with your loudest stakeholder, the person who shouts the most. They may not be the real customer. They may be somebody else who's involved, but not the real customer, the person whose services depend upon it. And it can be hard sometimes to pick out who the key customer is. Most big organisations I've been in have an internal travel system and expenses system. You put all the details in and it will tell you what flights to get. And they tell you that this is a wonderful service which provides benefit to all users. If anyone here has ever tried to book their travels with the corporate online system, it's very clear that the real customer, the person who's actually calling the shots, maybe they're the loudest stakeholder rather than the customer, are the people in the finance department who want to reduce costs. It's certainly not the travellers who want the best journey. And that's always going to happen in these kind of services. There's maybe 5 different areas who use the service. One of them really is the customer. It's the service that differentiates with them how effective and efficient the company is. Finding out that person can be a challenge because they're not necessarily the one hammering on your door telling you they want changes. So getting away from noise and looking at quality. So you're going for quality rather than quantity. And sometimes the real customers, just like diners in an English restaurant, are too scared to tell the truth. There's a true story from a very well-known British retailer. A friend of mine was working in their IT department, and she said, I want you to tell me when is the most important times in your business. If I give you Monday to Sunday, and then weeks of the year, tell me which are the most important periods. So if there's downtime, we can hit it to when it doesn't cause you so much trouble. And no one in the company had the courage to answer her, because they knew that if they supplied the answer and there was downtime then, and their manager was not happy, they would be in trouble. So she could find nobody brave enough to help her. So she left, which was the only constructive thing to do. Beware the loudest stakeholder. And this is 2 of my daughters, picture taken by the one running in. What I love about this story, I was there, and my oldest girl said, oh, come on, be serious, pose properly. And that's what she got. People don't necessarily take you seriously. And if any of you have tried to talk to your customers seriously and get a response, and they're not really very interesting, getting people to understand that it does matter. Most situations requires getting those people to understand that their life will be better if they take you seriously. And actually, these things you should know very well. If they upset my oldest sister, life will not be well. So, you've got to get the honesty and you've got to get people to take it seriously. And to do that, you have to understand their situation. We heard that yesterday. If you were at Phyllis's talk, I thought it was a really great example of understanding what's going on by getting out there in the business, and in her case, their managers actually buying a car to find out what the experience was like. And Paul talked about much the same thing yesterday. But as he's told me, and told you several times, there's no point mentioning that, because Paul knows that you don't listen to him. You're probably not listening to me. So really summing it up, it's the old joke about why is it harder to be a vet than a doctor? And the answer is because the dog cannot tell you where it hurts. You have to go out and experiment. You keep poking the dog until it bites you, and that's where the trouble is. And we shouldn't have to go out poking our customers until one of them bites us. But that seems to be what we do in a lot of situations. We have customers who can talk to us. So we should be like doctors. But too often we're like vets, poking in the dark. And very worried about how much they'll bite. He doesn't bite, he's lovely. So in order to do this, we really do need to understand the customers. And this is a little story, again from my children, about iced buns. Now that is an iced bun in English. We've established what the Spanish translation for the phrase is already. I hope that works. And I have to put a photograph up, because I was doing a similar talk in the US and used the phrase iced buns, and they had a very different image in their mind from a cake. I got in some trouble over that. I think it just shows that Americans have very unclean minds. We probably knew that. The story is around when I only had, still living with my wife, and we had 2 little children. They were 9 years and 3 years old now. And my wife is trying to teach the oldest how to count and to do arithmetic mathematics. So she's got the pack of 6 cakes, so she says, and you have to put a silly voice on when talking to children. Right then, dear, how many cakes each is that? So she's got 6 cakes and 4 people. So how many cakes does each person get? And she's looking for the answer 1.5. In case you're having trouble, I thought. And my youngest daughter looks up and says, I know. It's 1 for me, 1 for Daddy, 2 for Mummy, 2 for Rosie. And my wife was saying, no, be quiet, I'm serious here. I said, no, hang on a moment. I only want 1. Oops, I only want 1. And Amelia's only 3, she's only going to eat 1. Yeah. Rosie, do you want to? Yeah. My wife said, are you going to have 2? Yes. Well, I'm not going to see them wasted. Yes, I'm going to have 2 and stay fat, right? And what we got from the 3-year-old was a customer-oriented answer. She lived in this family long enough to know exactly where those cakes were going to go. And she was perfectly right. So the supplier side answer is all our customers are identical. So if we're delivering this much stuff, it'll be divided up. Or I know how they'll behave. Suppliers don't necessarily know how customers are going to behave. The customer does. There's several good stories. There's one from the Electricity Supply Board. We were working with the electricity company in Ireland. We were trying to prioritise incidents. We said, okay, so clearly if you upset the government regulator or you turn off the power to the whole of Ireland, that's the worst that can happen. So that's priority 1. And they said, they are really important things, and yes, they are priority 2 incidents. We said, what on earth is more important than the systems controlling electricity and getting the information to the government? And they said, the ticket to work system. What on earth is a ticket to work system? And basically it's the very simple system that issues a permit to work to their staff. And at the heart of it, it says, honestly, Paddy, it's okay. You go up the pylon and work on that 32,000 volt system because it really has been turned off. And if that system goes wrong, they kill their own people. And in their mind, that's far more important than turning the power on for a few million hours. And once they'd explained it to us, it was obvious. But until we went in and lived in their world and saw their priorities, we'd have done it completely wrong. We would have put the wrong prioritisation system in if we hadn't talked to them. So you've got to get out there and understand their world. It will be different. It's one of the things I learnt in the many years I spent in prison. I should rephrase that. One of the things I learned when I worked for the prison service was that things are different. You make assumptions in the world. There's a fire exit here. We all know what to do if the building catches fire. We head for the signs. I don't do much languages, but I've memorised escape exit in all sorts of different languages, just in case. Salida. Nudutko. Various things. Everywhere in the world you go, wherever you are, you know that if there's a problem, there'll be a way out. And you'll reach an exit and there'll be a crash bar, or you break the glass and get the key to come out. Not in a prison, there isn't. Because if you give them a fire exit, they will not wait until there's a fire before they use the fire exit. So the conversation is different in prison. It says, what will we do if there's a fire in the night? Answer, you all burn to death. Shouldn't have done the crime. Different perspectives. And really what we're looking at is a partnership. And partnerships mean compromise. And it's a misconception that a compromise means making everybody happy. A compromise is about everybody equally unhappy. If somebody's really happy, we've got it wrong. This is actually, so I'm using my own photographs, although clearly this is not my photograph. That is my father. He's now 89, so I did not take this picture. I'm not that old. But this is a standard British Royal Navy Coles crane from around 1960. And why it was a good crane that they used for years and years is it's a compromise. It's not the best crane to work as an operator, and it's not the best mobile crane to drive around. But the combination of the two was excellent. The trade-offs between the two. We have to do that. We have to work sometimes with more than one customer to remember all the concerns. I was at one of our customers in Australia, a big department store. We've got to do things differently. We've got to make this a partnership. Because at the moment, you provide a really, really good service desk to us. And every time we call the service desk, we pay you $17. And it's worth $17. You're very good. But what we really want is a lot less calls to the service desk. And that means we want you to sit down with us and work out how we can pay you less money. And the way the contract and the relationship is set up at the moment is we don't see why you should want to do that. So we need to do things in a way that is constructive, so that it's in your interests to help us make the changes to make our business better. And you can have a contract that pays you for every time you call the desk. It's really in your interest to provide a service that doesn't work so well, so they have to call you. Now, I know we would never do that in IT, because we're much nicer people than that. But we need to get situations where the partnership really can work. And in case you're wondering about these initials, TCO, we all know what TCO is? Total cost of ownership. I decided that wasn't enough. Because money is not everything. I work for an American company and you can actually be shot for saying that. But what the hell? I think there are other things like carbon footprint and greenness. I worked for the government for 23 years. And I know in government the most important thing is not embarrassing an elected official. That outweighs whatever it costs. So I've come up with the phrase, the complete consequences of operation. And that's what we're trying to look at. There are other things going on in your customers than money. And if you don't know what they are, you have to find out or you will do the wrong thing. And you will, in traditional IT fashion, work really hard, long hours, to efficiently and effectively deliver the wrong thing. IT is good. Said dogs can talk to you. The advantage that the vet does have over the doctor is that dogs do not lie to you. Come back to how we lie to doctors soon. Any other done any dealings with Japan, there's an element in Japanese culture that means whatever questions you ask them, they will say yes. Are you happy with the contract? Yes. And do you want to work with us? Yes. And then they will go away and they'll never contact you. But they will not say no to your face. They will not say they do not like what you've done. Yes. I've done training courses around the world. They give us these forms to fill out where they judge what you like as a trainer. And handing them out in China and Japan is just a joke because they say you're wonderful. I'm not saying I wasn't wonderful, but you give them to people and you watch them fill it out and they give it back to you. They're not going to say anything other than wonderful. They lie to you because that's the culture. I think it's quite a nice culture. I enjoy talking to Japanese. But there are other situations. This guy here is obviously supposed to know the city he's policing. So you ask for directions and he's giving you precise directions. He may or he may not have any idea where you want to go. But if he gives you detailed directions, he feels good, you feel good, he goes his way, you get thoroughly lost. But that's fine. People sometimes lie for very good reasons, like the polite English people in a restaurant. It's not worth the aggravation. You feel better by saying, avoiding the dispute. We get that in real life quite a lot. But the consequences of that dishonesty are, apart from a very, very full soft draw, are getting the wrong thing all the time and having to try and make do with the wrong services. And as I said, people will lie to you. So if you're going to your doctor because they've detected high cholesterol and they're concerned about your heart conditions, and they ask you what you had for dinner yesterday, irrespective of which of these two you actually had, what are you going to tell them? Are you going to confess that that was your Sunday breakfast? And I hesitate to admit, but it is true, that is actually a photograph of my Sunday breakfast a year or so back in Australia. It was cooked for a specific purpose and it did deal with a hangover. But if I was at the doctor's the next morning asking what I was eating yesterday, it would look a lot more like this. And of course this is one of the photographs that is not lying, because there has not been anything sufficiently healthy in my household to take a photograph of for far too long. Cooked by my cousin. Very good it was too. But you're going to lie. You're going to lie to protect yourself, for your own self-esteem, for your own image. And if we're going to measure things based on that lying, we're going to very carefully measure the wrong things again. So we need to check our measurement exercise. We need to follow it down to the customer and back again. Not just presume that we're reading these correctly. And we've also got to get away from the IT commitment to measure every piece of data we can, because it's possible. One of the things I love about my car is that it tells me almost nothing. It tells me the speed I'm doing, how much petrol there is left in it. It will tell me other things if I want to know. But apart from those two things, basically, if something goes wrong, a light will come on. It doesn't confuse me with more data than I need. When I was younger, I had cars with all sorts of oil pressure dials and things, and I thought that was really cool. But I've grown out of it now. I want it to tell me what I need to know and nothing else. And that's a really good philosophy that we don't follow too often. In order to do it with customers, you need to follow it down the line and come back again. There has to be a token ITIL slide in every presentation. So I thought I'd better put in something about the service life cycle. But just trying to make the point that we need customers at every stage. This isn't a one-off position. Clearly, in strategy, if your strategy doesn't reflect the business strategy, then there's no point in how well written it is or how carefully you follow it. What that means is that IT are not in a position to write their IT services strategy. It should be completely impossible for them to do it. The business has to say what the IT services need to deliver and need to support. a good friend of mine, and I think the cleverest person in the business, Christian Neeson, described governance wonderfully, and I'm aware I'm being followed by an expert on governance, but I love Christian's definition. It's just the management of management. And he loves that definition because it makes it impossible for IT to do IT governance. Just the same way, you've got to be judged by somebody outside, and your direction has to be set by your customer. Service design is great. If you don't have people involved in the design, you will do the wrong thing. There's a testing story from many years ago. Someone I knew was, they were setting out to test the embedded software in pacemakers to keep hearts going. So they've got a room of experts with 2 American cardiac surgeons. These people are paid $1,000 a minute. And they stand up before them and say, it's a little bit embarrassing because, clearly this is really important, but the software that runs is actually relatively simple and the testing exercises is very clear. So, we've got you all here today, but we just confirm what is really obvious, that we're going to test the software to make sure that it doesn't stop. And the 2 surgeons looked at each other in a worried way. And Bill said, okay, we've done something wrong. He explained it to me. And they said, well, if you put a pacemaker in a patient, it's because they have irregular heart. And you can schedule the surgery. You've got several weeks to deal with it. It's dodgy, but as long as they don't do anything like running up and down stairs, they'll be fine for a while. So if the pacemaker stops, you're back in that situation again. You've got several weeks, and you can schedule the surgery. They take it easy, everything's fine. On the other hand, if the pacemaker speeds up, you can kill the patient in less than 5 minutes. And Bill went, oh, now you've explained it, I understand. And they threw their plans out. Bill, being a theatrical guy, actually ripped his paper up on the spot. But they went back and started again. And they built the software so that if anything went wrong, it stopped and told you it had stopped, which was the opposite of what they expected. Design stage. If they hadn't involved expensive customers at the design stage, they would have ended up spending a fortune further down the line. So customer involvement in design is really important. And I love in version 3 that there is a book called Service Design. I think it's the most important thing in item B3. Just the title of the book, irrespective of whether there's anything good in it. Now, I wasn't involved in that book, so there probably isn't. No, I didn't mean to say that out loud. But the idea that we should be designing services instead of building software, putting it out there, letting a service evolve around it. And if you believe in evolution, the whole point about evolution is it doesn't know where it's going. And I've seen a lot of services that clearly evolved. Version 3 telling us in design was a major step forward. Transition, clearly very simple point. Part of transition, getting things in right, is doing user acceptance testing. What do you need to do user acceptance testing? It's not a trick question. The answer is users. And who owns the users? And how often does the customer not supply enough users at the right time and then grumble that the product doesn't work properly? If they're not involved, it will all go wrong. Clearly in operations, you're doing it. And in CSI, the biggest role, continuous service improvement, the biggest role customers have is to define what the word improvement means. It doesn't mean easier to operate, it means more use to them. And there's a vital role there. A lot of other roles as well, but that one about understanding what improvement means is important. And the customers have to be helped in this. Lots of people have done the foundation exam. You may remember there's a question in there about tools officially, and it says there are 4 statements, arrange them in the right order. And the correct answer in the end is understand the business requirements. build your processes, specify the tool requirements, and then, and only then, go and talk to tools providers. So that's the right answer in foundation exam. So let's apply that to buying a car. First stage, you go out and ask the business what they want. All right, we'd like a car that can seat at least 5 people. It has to fly. It needs to do at least 800 kilometers an hour. I don't want it to cost more than 50 euros, and it should do at least 100 kilometers on a litre of water. Right, so that's the business requirement. We now go out and build it. Well, no. And in real life, you have to talk to the customers with an understanding of what's possible and what they want, and then come to some compromises in between. And exactly the same is actually true in buying software, irrespective of what we teach at the foundation exam. You need an understanding of possibilities, and that's a dialogue that has to happen realistically, with compromise on both sides. Prioritisation, I think we talked about that. We talked about that in ESB. I keep getting my stories out of sequence, but they're there. The service pipeline is really important. We've heard about portfolio management already from Rob and others. If you can't find a customer to tell you that something's really important, why are you doing it? If you're doing it for a fashion reason, then question why you're doing it. If you want to upgrade your Windows system because everyone else you know is, that's not a business justification. And the things we do, there are fancy words for them. You know, I knew Paul was here, so I thought I'd better make sure that I acknowledged where ABC came from. I know everyone in Spain understands attitude, behaviour and culture, and you will listen to it one day. It really does matter. See the bigger picture. All those fancy business phrases that we use, but trying to convert them into English. Know who your customer is. Make sure they know they're the customer. That's not a trivial issue. There's the workbook for ISO 20000. When we wrote the original, the first question for each process is there a process owner? And there's a little footnote at the bottom of the page, and it says, the correct answer to this question, or the correct way to answer this question, is to bear this in mind. The answer is not yes until you have found the person who is supposed to be the process owner, and they admit that they are. We've found an awful lot of people who the senior management said are process owners, but they didn't know about. So, the really important point is that one at the bottom. This is not about fancy communications and conference calls. You learn a lot more by drinking coffee with people. Get out there in the customers and understand how they're about. So, thank you very much for your time. You may now wake up again. I'll be around for the rest of the day. In questions now, but I'll be around the IBM stand, and I'm happy to talk to anyone who's got nothing better to do. Thank you.